You can't have normal hunger cues if your leptin, your cortisol, your insulin are out of whack. So the goal is to always correct that in the process.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Krista Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. All right, today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Dr. Stacy Baker. She holds a doctorate in traditional naturopathy, a master's of science in holistic nutrition, and after 10 years in the wellness industry, she's found her passion in functional and alternative medicine. She's combined her love of Ayurveda, functional medicine testing, naturopathy, holistic nutrition, and fitness to create a one-of-a-kind bio-individualized approach to wellness, which includes looking at the body as one big, beautiful, synergistic system, which needs to be treated as so, focusing on the mind, body, and spirit, connecting to achieve the highest form of health imaginable. I just feel that to my soul. If you're on Instagram, you might know Dr. Stacy. You might not know her by her voice and the podcast yet, but you might run across, this happens to me all the time. People, you show them something like, oh, I've seen that before. She has a lot of very shareable statements that she makes online. And so I've admired her from afar for a long time. So welcome to the show today, Dr. Stacy.
Well, thank you so much for that beautiful intro and for having me. I am so excited to chat today.
Yeah. So a couple of things Dr. Stacy is really into, I would say both metabolism, blood sugar, lifestyle, mindset work. And I think this is very beautiful. I was just telling her off record that I'm doing some new experimental coaching with my clients, and I'm just addicted to the transformation that can happen in 30 minutes. And it's the most fun I'm doing in practice right now. And I'm just playing with it, exploring it, because I was joking that half the time we're working on nutrition and half the time we're working on the emotions related to it. When people come in and say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, yeah, that actually was already there. Let's resolve the overwhelm before we can address the actual real physiological challenges that you're having. So I'm going to get into all of that. So we're going to cover both of those things. I think these are just topics that affect every single human being. I do not care who you are. But first, your story is always how we live out our lives, right? We're so affected by our story. And I know Dr. Stacy, she's also certified as a personal trainer. So I know she's got a bit of a story here before she ends up in naturopathy maybe. So tell us a little bit about, I know I've read online you talking about how you had a lot of symptoms, but of course you had that typical, all my labs were normal. So tell us a little bit, crack open your story. Tell us how we got to where we are now.
Yes, thank you. So I'll try to do the express version because this has been long withstanding. For me, my symptoms have been even as old as I can remember, with debilitating anxiety, insomnia, probably as old as 5. It's been a long, but I think a lot of that was starting from being on overuse of antibiotics because of ear infections, because of dairy sensitivities, things we didn't know about, right, in the mid to late 80s. And I actually grew up in a family of medical doctors. Obviously, medicine was the first, all right, let's fix this. But as I got older, symptoms got worse, started looking like different things, right? Hormone imbalances, thyroid issues, panic and anxiety was pretty much a stronghold my whole life. But now looking back, I realized how much of that was blood sugar related as a child of the late 80s, early 90s, right? Everything, we took fat out of everything, added sugar into everything. So that was just another layer of dysfunction for me. And then I think getting to the point where I had breast implant illness, which just was the pervasive like straw that broke the camel's back for me. It was just more than my system could handle. And when I say breast implant illness, I don't think like that was it. Just get the implants. That was not it for me. I didn't get the implants out and everything went away. It was just the suppression of the immune system that they just tipped the needle there. And I just couldn't do anything normally at that point. Being a mom of 2 really young children at that time, which pregnancies are depleting. And it all came to a head. And I was not finding any answers conventionally. And just medications, right? Just anti-anxiety, all these other things. And I just birth control for hormone problems, all these things. And they were just And so I was like, I've got to figure this out. I had already been like a personal trainer as I was home with my kids. And it was interesting because the clientele that I brought on were people who were like challenges, right? Like the normal calorie macro stuff wasn't working for them. I had a lot of autoimmune clients, a lot of people, and it's just interesting how like we are attracting people, and it's all just like an opportunity for us to grow so we can help them better. It was so much more than just the workouts and the dietary recommendations. I formed really close bonds with them. And I even have some of them 15 years later as clients now, which is really interesting. But they definitely, between them and my health issues, pushed me to grow and to learn more and to dive into everything I could to figure out, like, women and men are all showing signs of dysfunction now, but why are we getting this hit right around this like 30-year-old mark for most of us? It's getting younger. And what is happening? Because a lot of these symptoms all look the same, right? The brain fog, the fatigue, the autoimmune, it's all the same. So what is causing these issues? And I just went all in.
I totally understand that. I think that we're such a mirror of I'm always appalled at how often I resonate with my clients. I'm like, are we talking about your health or my health? That's true.
I know.
And so it's not shocking that, especially when you care deeply, that these people find you and then they're willing to share more, because so often we're like, I want to change. I think it's very common for us to want to change a physical appearance piece of ourselves. There's so many things that you said right there that were related to physical appearance. I work with a lot of skin issues, and it's the same thing. It's right. It's a lot of physical appearance. It's the thing that drives us to take action. And yet there's a lot underneath the hood, underneath the paint of the car, right? And so there's a lot there. And so often the others that were maybe helping them, or they were coming up empty because the other pieces underneath the hood were just not in synergy. So you were starting a personal training, and then when did you decide? Maybe you were, I don't know your whole schooling background. When did you was there like a catalyst in time? You're like, I have to do more here. So did you go back to school at some point?
Yes. As I was working as a trainer and home with my kids at that point, I was back in school working on my master's in nutrition. And that was another layer, but it wasn't enough to move the needle for everybody or me.
Totally understand.
So so I'm like, all right, let's just go for it. Let's just completely go back to school. And my first majors were psychology and interior design. So and they all just give me a beautiful spectrum of like how to view life and everything else. But I just went all in at that point. And then on top of my doctorate in naturopathy, then I was like, all right, let's do some functional stuff. So I took a few certifications in functional medicine. And and I'm a perpetual student. I'm always trying to take master classes and webinars and all these other things, because if there's something I'm excited about, I want to learn everything I can about it, especially if I feel like it will help me and everybody else I work with.
Yeah. So this is going to be a beautiful segue into an area that you love talking about, which is metabolism and blood sugar. But before I go there, you said something interesting, and I love to highlight this because I do get a reasonable amount of questions of people that say, where did you go get certified to do whatever you're doing? And I was like, I went to the School of Hard Knocks. And actually, I got my traditional dietitian degree, which comes with you have to go to an internship for a year, et cetera. And whatever, none of that matters. My point in telling them that is that gives me an understanding of the world, as you said, because I think about that and I think about a background in psychology and also visual arts, essentially, right? Interior design, of course, would give you a perspective into what you're doing now. Why wouldn't it? Of course it would, especially with mindset. And your schooling is this foundation. And then no matter what, you have to go learn more. So I ended up with actually a naturopathic mentor that helped mentor me through a lot of clients early on in my profession. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because people ask, how did you figure this out? I have no issue with the question, but there's multiple ways to accomplish it. And you said something interesting. You went to school, you got your doctorate in naturopathy, but you said, I also learned more about functional medicine. What did you feel that was the biggest difference between your doctorate in naturopathy and then additional certifications in functional medicine?
I think I'm a traditionally trained naturopath, which goes very old school. Like we're doing, which these are things that are coming back, right? Trends, fasting and alkaline diet and sunshine and all these different spectrums. All of those things are really great. But remember, fasting in context in those times where you go to the woods and you fast for 30 days and you heal your conditions, right? So it was a matter of how do I modernize and make it. And also one thing I realized as working with clients is seeing is believing. So when you can bring in that functional testing and show them on the lab work, like, your body is stressed, your body is toxic, this is what we can support right now, why we work on these foundational lifestyle things. And that's a whole other thing with blood sugar. We have to see it or we don't believe it. I can work with people all day long and I can tell you, like, you're having blood sugar spikes, you're having insulin spikes all day long. But until they see it, they will cling tightly to those foods and that lifestyle and the meal timing. So seeing is believing. And so that was the main reason why I brought in the functional side of things. Yeah, bridge that gap.
No, I totally understand that. I say a different version of what you're saying, which is you learn the most from your results. So I can't wait till you get your first results, because I get it. I understand it. It's the same as seeing is believing. So let's get into blood sugar metabolism, because you made a great point earlier about how a lot of things look similar, right? So if our issue, and what's fun for me, and it's a challenge, I like a challenge, and is I actually think that a lot of people don't even resonate with the words brain fog. I think they might say, sure, that's happened to me if you walk into another room and you forgot what you were doing there, but they wouldn't. Brain fog feels like a weak term for some high achieving people. And they need this love and support too of the body. And so I'm always looking for more magnetic words that are like, oh yes, that is me. But regardless, if the conversation is brain fog or trouble focusing at work or getting your stuff done or whatever you want to say, or forgetting why you walked into the next room, there's many underlying reasons for that. And I'd love to hear, and blood sugar being one of them, gut dysbiosis and toxic burden being other pieces, right? Breast implant illness, I'm sure you were extremely fogged, just a guess. And of course, blood sugar is massively impacted by all of those other pieces too. So for me, it's always there's multiple pieces to the puzzle no matter what, right? Like what is the thing that's burdening the blood sugar? But I'd love to hear a little bit about how metabolism and blood sugar work was an epiphany in your own journey, because undoubtedly it was. Otherwise, I don't think you would be so connected to it. So like bridge that gap for us and let's get into some sneaky blood sugar stuff.
Yes. So this is something that, like everything I've experienced in my life, I always joke and say I have to learn the hard way, but it's the only way, because like you said, you can have all these certificates and titles and letters behind your name, but experience is where you really gain knowledge, right? So experiencing these things firsthand, learning what helps and what pulls you out of it, and then bringing that in clinically is everything. So for me specifically, I had done every protocol under this, right? I had tried everything, the Lyme, heavy metals, gut stuff, you name it, I had done it, but still was 40, 50 pounds overweight. Right. And everybody says, oh, detox the mold, it'll come right. It doesn't work that way. And so what I found was the more I would try to move my body, the more I would try to dial in on things, I would be even more inflamed. My body was really fighting back. And I started wearing a CGM years ago. And this wasn't really trendy at that point. It wasn't really well versed, but I was like, my numbers are in range. But looking back now and knowing what I know and collecting data from clients for years and years, I'm like, in range, obviously, just like conventional lab work is not good enough. You have to get, if you're still inflamed, you're still gaining weight, you have more energy on your body than you should have, right? Then there's a problem. And so then I tightened and I tweaked and I tightened that range to get into a more optimal state. And everything just switched. Like inflammation dropped. I was losing weight consistently, getting my body to a healthier place. I wanted to look as good as I felt on the inside. You know what I mean? And a lot of women feel that. They're like, I feel like with how I'm eating and how I'm living, I'm doing all the things, I'm eating clean, but I still don't look the way it doesn't match my lifestyle. And I know that sounds really superficial in a way, but women and men, like there's something to like wanting to look and feel the same, equal, balance, right? It should reflect what you're doing on your day to day.
Yeah.
So when I learned how to correct my own blood sugar and find that place of balance and test not just blood sugar, but ketones, and learn all the nuances of what that means, and looking at the changes throughout our menstrual cycle and all those things, it became like a fine art. And then I can walk other people through that and just help learn the ins and outs of it. And it was a complete game changer for me. Like so many ways, mood, anxiety, the cognitive issues, the energy, stability, all those things just went away. It's
How
just
long
crazy.
ago did you have that experience that
I
allowed you
think,
to then change things?
yes. So I would say probably 4 years ago was my first monitor.
Yeah. Cool. Have you been wearing a CGM ever since?
Yes, I have one right now.
Yeah. What would you say? So I think I also I had a short stint with the CGM. It was actually probably about 4 years ago. And I enjoyed that. I had a kind of a different side of the coin with some colleagues close to me that said that it almost triggered some disordered behaviors from
Mm.
their past related to exercising a lot. I think there's probably a sizable population, college age young women, younger or older than that over exercise, under eating is a huge issue for. I know that this is a population that I love because their basic hormones, their thyroid, adrenals go down the tank and they don't feel as awesome as they could. And it doesn't really show up on labs super well, unfortunately. So I care about this population. But again, bringing in the mindset piece, what about when people look at it as a mental trigger?
That is a good question. And while I will say most people are like, yes, I want to know so I can ship things and optimize, you do have the people who you show them and they see the dysfunction and they get mad. It's rare. You more so, if somebody's going to invest in one, they're going to be all in.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it can, like you said, people want to perfect it too much. And I tell them, I'm like, look, I did a month at a time. I do a month. I'd work on that for 3 months. I'd do it again. Like you got to give your body time. It's not to evoke fear. It's to evoke awareness so that you can know what points in the day need the most support. Even if you're just focusing on one meal that needs the most support, if you're spiking the most at dinner, then we got to look at the dinner and the timing, right? But some people do feel threatened because if you think about changing your food requires daily intention and commitment. And a lot of people want to check out because we're so over consumed with everything else, right? We just want to eat the same thing every day. Just tell me what to eat. I'm just going to, and it becomes lost, right? Intuitive eating becomes lost. We're not eating cyclically to support our hormones and things like that. And so some people do feel threatened. Or like you said, it triggers this disordered like orthorexia situation. And usually at that point, all right, we got our month of data. Let's just work with what we got. Let's come off of it because it can be hard to stay on it and try to perfect it while you have it.
Yeah, I think it lends itself to so much conversation on mindset, which we'll get to in a moment. And these are the beautiful things that you learn when you get to have community conversations with an individual person. And I would almost say there's a lot of discrepancy around the term intuitive eating. It's almost, let me back up to blood sugar. It would be easy for someone to check out right now while we're talking about blood sugar because it's easy for people to not think that they have a blood sugar issue. Signs that I had blood sugar issues were that I would not leave home without snacks in my bag. That was it, right? Like I would get hangry if I didn't get to eat. And I'm not saying that's necessarily like terrible, right? These are hunger cues to an extent also. But my mother I'm like the fifth of 6 children. And my mom had gestational diabetes with the last 2 of us as she was in more advanced maternal age. So I would imagine that kind of carried on. I don't know. These were pieces I put together because I also at one time was like, I don't have a blood sugar problem, right? And so it's very easy for us to not think we have an issue around something because you don't know what you don't know. And then there's such that subclinical thing where it's not really falling into those. And yet blood sugar is such an easy thing for us to look at. Probably almost arguably one of the least expensive things we could do. You brought up intuitive eating, and I would say like intuitive eating can't even exist when you have issues with overeating or unconscious eating. I think there's like a whole like disassociation. And this is why I used to say, don't put me in front of the food. I will just start eating it. And this was dissociation, right? It was like, I was just it was interesting. It's so good for us all to look at our relationship. I always said like, I didn't ever have a disordered eating relationship would be what I would say. But in general, if you sat me in front of food, I would just want to eat it. When I was a kid, I was a picky eater. Then I loved food. And then I'm like, don't sit me by it. I'll just eat it. But it's so funny to go through the layers of our onion. And so I bring that up because I'm not the only one listening who's experienced that, right? Because you can accidentally really screw your blood sugar when you behave like that, right? When you behave like that. So there's so much to behavior.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And that's just societal, right? Like you're going to hang out with somebody, you're going to go out to eat. Usually it's going to be after sunset, right? When you're most insulin resistant. And so literally, or everybody's having their family dinner when everybody's home late and wondering why they can't get in the fat burn overnight when they have their biggest meal of the day later than dinner ever should. So it really is, it is unlearning, unconditioning. And you can't have normal hunger cues if your leptin, your cortisol, your insulin are out of whack.
Yeah.
So the goal is to always correct that in the process.
You brought up another term about changing people's food as someone who's trained as a dietitian. And my early functional medicine explorations were with manipulating food and food sensitivities. I've like fully 180'd that whole experience, right? Where I'm actually not avoiding food unnecessarily, but it was very popular to do for over a decade. And we still stick with it. And it's still usually food manipulation is still going to be, and I'm not saying I know that's a huge piece of blood sugar stuff, but it brings up a lot for people because sometimes people have gotten restrictive. It's usually the first stop someone has had. And I have a little bit of a policy or a mantra that I try not to change someone's diet unless it's their idea. Because if it's my idea, they don't really want that. And I will tell you, I've had a ton of dietitians as clients, very resistant to changing diets. And there's no judgment there. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
No judgment. It is simply, and there's a lot of stuff there on why that is, right? Like I shouldn't have to do X, Y, Z, but I try not to change something like that unless it's their idea because we have so many emotions wrapped up into it. So I bring that up because this is a wonderful, safe space to like unpack interesting things and hopefully bringing these things up, bring something up for someone listening if they need it, right? Okay, you brought up a term. You said we're often eating our meals, our largest meal after sunset when we're more insulin resistant. Let's talk about that more because I know you love circadian biology.
Yeah. Okay. So what I find to be one of the biggest impingements on someone's metabolism is that it's all about their meal timing. So we're skipping meals and the intermittent fasting trend, which I'm all about from fasting, but let's be targeted, let's be smart, let's be protective of hormones, right? And let's make sure that other things are checked off before we go there. That's how I approach things. You can't jump straight. For somebody who's like shaky in between meals, has to eat every 2 to 3 hours, you can't pull them into a 24-hour fast. Like it's not going to happen. You have to stabilize blood sugar. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's going to throw lots of electrolyte imbalances. It's going to be terrible. And they're going to hate you and probably never talk to you again. So I try to at least bring awareness into, all right, we got to stop skipping breakfast. We've got to give the proper signaling in the morning for breakfast to help pad that cortisol response so that the body feels safe and fed. So that is so important. Getting your sunshine before you even eat your meal. Eat before you have your coffee, right? Don't do anything that's unnaturally going to skew that cortisol response in the morning. And then our cortisol highest mid-morning to noonish. That's when our digestive capacity is at its largest. And most people have their tiny, I'm going to have some cheese and cracker, like a little salad. And that's when we should be having the bulk of our nutrition is during lunch to help, once again, have that cortisol response. And then if we really prioritize that, dinner would naturally be lighter as cortisol drops off. Because when cortisol drops off, we are also, as melatonin is taking the scene, we are becoming more insulin resistant when melatonin starts to take place around sunset. If we are eating at that time, melatonin can't do the cellular detoxification that needs to happen, all of those metabolic processes that need to happen, hormonal processes. And so when we are filling our tank, so to speak, that late in the day, we're shunting all of those other regulatory things that need to happen. And it all seems to me so simple, even though I used to be that one that would snack while watching TV at 10 o'clock at night. So I can't say I'm always perfect, but it's learning to eat more in rhythm of your body's circadian, the cortisol and melatonin rhythm, so that you can optimize and get the absolute best insulin response you can. And that's one way I usually help support is just shifting the meals and eating more at certain times of the day to support that.
I want to talk about, I think that I bring this up early in my one-on-one programming with clients. And sometimes perfectionist questions come in. What if this and this? And I was like, hey, this is more stressful, circumventing the success that could be had. So if you do not like it, you do not have to do this thing. That's up to you. That's individually up to each individual person. But I will offer, and this is like a fun caveat. I spent a couple weeks in Europe last year, and I was on the lookout for what is it that is healthier. And I will say, I feel like it varies by country very much. So I spent a lot of time in Spain, and I think Spanish culture, which flows down, and Portuguese that flows into South America, where I've spent some time. Honestly, the bulk of my overseas travel has been in these handful of countries. There's very late dining. And so I'd love to talk about if you have any feelings, because I think this is funny. I'm like, they do not sleep. They drink all the time. They smoke. They look good. And so I think it's comical. And I have my reasons. Like, my reasons are that they're very happy and that they're dancing a lot, quite truly. I think if you're dancing after you're eating, you've fixed probably your blood sugar problems. And eating's about the European dinner time of 9 or 10 p.m., which is very normal.
Yeah. I think that you're right about community. I think it's the state they're eating in, right? They are enjoying, they're not stress eating while they're driving their kids the car line, like just choking food down. It is the state that we eat in. It is the community, the movement, right? All of those things matter. And the food supply, the amount of toxicity, right? They may not have as many things in their environment as we have in the United States that are making them more insulin resistant, right? They might be getting more sunlight during the day, right? They may not have all of the blue light like we have here as much. So it's really like environmentally different. We have so many just things working against us, plus the hustle culture, which they don't also have there either. So it's just a lot of things compiling.
Yeah. I would say I would pretty much echo that. That's my observation. I'm like, they're just having more fun than us, as far as I can tell. It's a good chart. That's as far. That is what I could tell.
Yeah.
All right. So we covered your story, some sneaky blood sugar stuff you mentioned, things that improve for you. Again, just to highlight, because I think it's good to just highlight sneaky things that might mean maybe you need to tend to your blood sugar, which is actually a lovely, less complicated intervention potentially. Anxiety, brain fog, shakiness. What else would you add to the potentially very long list? If you're urinating a lot when you're drinking water, maybe you're not actually hydrating that much, or in other words, getting the fluid and nutrients into the cell. Electrolytes are minerals that help fluid and nutrients get into the cell. I recommend all of my clients start by drinking electrolytes when we begin our work together to improve energy. And then we get even more strategic with our electrolyte recommendations as test results come in. Now, generally, electrolytes are potassium, sodium, and chloride. One of my favorite electrolyte products is Pickleball Cocktail from Jigsaw Health, because it's one of the only products you can get with an adequate dose of potassium to meet my recommendations, which is critical for blood sugar, which everyone should care about, hormone health, and digestion. Huge thing for relapsing digestive issues. Jigsaw Health is also maker of the famous adrenal cocktail, made popular by the pro-metabolic corner of the internet and Root Cause Protocol, as well as a multi-mineral electrolyte for recovery called Electrolyte Supreme. You can get a discount on all of Jigsaw's amazing products, including Pickleball, Electrolyte Supreme, and Adrenal Cocktail at jigsawhealth.com with the code LESSSTRESSED10. That's 3 S's, less stressed 10.
Fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, panic. When you think of those hypo situations, right? The depersonalization on a really heavy level, which is another level of brain fog, right? Where it's a cognitive issue at that point, vision issues. But I even think recurring symptoms, right? Like a suppressed immune system, an inability to heal, all of those things are a sign that there is a stressor happening biochemically every single day in your body. And a lot of energy is going into to fixing the blood sugar up and down roller coaster. That's not going to all these other areas in the body. So hormone imbalances, all those things.
Yeah, cool. Very good. Okay, you have a statement, and you have many statements that you make online that are like sexy sound bites, which is great. This is like...
And straight and to the point.
Good for you. I love it. It's fantastic. I share many of your things.
Thank you.
There was one of them that you stated that I want to highlight before we move to mindset work, which is eating more doesn't balance blood sugar or make you more metabolically resilient, or anything you want to say to that.
Yeah. And especially coming from my years as a personal trainer, we were taught to eat protein every 2 to 3 hours to be more metabolic. Now you got to think about the context of that, right? Where they're trying to stimulate mTOR, protein synthesis, but they're also combining that style of eating with a very, usually working out a couple times a day, right? You're strength training a couple times a day, trying to give your body more protein. But I can't tell you how many bodybuilders I work with because of eating so often and overeating protein, which anything we can't use for protein synthesis gets transmuted and changes into glucose, and it's processed in the same way as the body would process sugar. We have to be intentional about pulling and also train your body, right? To, okay, I've got to have this snack. It trains you to be less metabolic and hangry in between meals, because now you've conditioned yourself. You've conditioned yourself to be a sugar burner at that part. And you can't get into fat adaptation if you're constantly feeding your body. And that's really the nuance there, is we have to give our body time in between meals for blood sugar and insulin to drop enough that we can burn fat in between.
Okay. So I know blood sugar is a passion of yours because it's been very life-changing. It's really not, there's a bit of exploration, learning, adjusting, right? But it's this kind of art. It's like you brought it up earlier. It's understanding the rhythms of your body, which I think is this beautiful thing that is actually the underpinning of, as I grow and transition, that's just the recurrent theme. Like, we have these rhythms in nature, in our body, et cetera. And when we ignore those, our body, so quote unquote, fights back overall.
Always.
But I know another area that you love is mindset work. And I think you even have I don't remember what your program is called. Something about, is it about change? I cannot remember what it's called.
Yes, creating change. Yes,
Creating
it's the
change.
first time I am doing something that's not out of the spectrum of this work, but it's not functional medicine by any means, but it's something that's missing for a lot of people.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to do this. I feel that I'm on a 3 to 4 year experimentation of all kinds of nervous system modalities. And I think I've landed for now, which is exciting because I felt like I kissed a lot of frogs. I was like, that was fine. That was fine. And then I settled on, these were the things that were really transformational for me. Why don't I support my clients with these things? So I'm having a lot of fun with that. And I'd love to hear how mindset work became a foundational, it's duh, but not duh. And I think I really want to hear it from a perspective of, one, from the client, to see that there are people that it's a unicorn thing, a beautiful, wonderful unicorn thing where it's like all being integrated in there. And I also want for the practitioner who's listening to see, oh, there's opportunities for us to do these things. And it's a little bit of an uncoupling as a clinician because, to be honest, I don't really feel like I learned that in school either. And it wasn't my inclination. Whereas you have a foundation of psychology. So maybe it was always a little bit there, like the interest in humans. And I would say I love assessing how humans tick also. But tell us about mindset work, change. What are some of the reasons that you felt really called to this and how this is unfolding more so in your practice?
Yeah. So yeah, it has been a part of my life for such a long time. I think a lot of that was because I was like the one, and I'm from a family of 8 like you are. And I was like, why am I the only one out of all this whole family? I'm like change. Yes, I'm rearranging my bedroom all the time. I'm changing degrees and jobs and all these things. And I just love it and I embrace it. And I think every little thing I've learned has given me a beautiful perspective of the world. But I have people in my family who are working the same job they've been working for 40 years, no matter what. They will not change a thing, won't change their home. And I'm like, okay. But I also see how that is affecting their happiness. And I feel like I'm very happy because I make a lot of change and shifts. So thinking at from a practitioner point of view is, I look at it as how our thoughts actually influence our biochemistry, right? They're creating the same hormone signaling, the same neuropeptides, all of these things are right. And so we can't change our biochemistry, right? If we are keeping the same thoughts, habits, and actions that are promoting more of the same, right? So we have to start, and a lot of people aren't aware of what thoughts are driving them, right? That we're just running on this program, and it might even be a program that was passed down to us that we are just constantly running off of. And like we talked earlier, a lot of this healing journey is a lot of unconditioning and a lot of unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can help someone be aware of their thought patterns, and a lot of people can't do that until they start to do some mindset work where you're just drowning out the noise, right? You're giving the mind time to settle so you can see what program you're actually running off of. And then from there, start to bring awareness into how that's driving your actions and behavior. And when you can stop and question, then you can start to think, okay, this habit more in relationship to my past self or the future I'm trying to create. And how can I create something new if I'm doing everything I used to do and just adding in some vitamins, right? It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how much of this working with clients, I see them. I don't tell them to change their jobs or their relationships or move, but those are things that naturally happen as they start to heal their body and they start to get their cognition and their intuition back, that they are making these big changes and it's all for the better. But sometimes we're stuck in that state of fog that we're stuck. We're just living by default, right? We're just going through the motions of life. We're not truly living. And I've been there, and it's a sucky place to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you heal your body, you get your blood sugar stable, you get your body to a place of homeostasis, then you can go deeper into some of that work.
I think this is so valuable because I want to point out that your smile was like the biggest and most vibrant when you were talking about that.
I love it.
Than any other part. It was so funny because there's a lot of light bulbs going off for me as you were talking about that. I'm going to reiterate something you said. We can't change our biochemistry if we just keep the same thought patterns, actions, behaviors, etc. And I have this client I love right now. She's amazing. But I remember she said to me, I'm getting this validation. She's doing a lot of testing before she came to me, which is fine. That's almost a phase 2, right? It's like you weren't getting testing to validate it. So now you're doing a lot of testing, right? Almost that could be another stage past the food manipulation thing that people often do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing this. I'm getting a lot of messages that my body's under stress. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but I cannot ignore that I'm getting these resounding messages. And she said, I want to feel better, but I do not want to become a new person. I thought that is an interesting statement. I don't have judgment around it. I just thought, how fascinating. And here's the beautiful thing. There's a beautiful piece to it is she sees I don't have to become, like, I don't have to quit my job, move to an island and all these things, because when you change your thoughts, like your life actually gets better and shifts. And you did a beautiful job stating and summarizing some of the stuff that I am exploring with my clients because it was so transformational to me and created basically my favorite version of my practice in my life as it currently stands, right? By doing some of that thought management. And now I'm very deeply in that work again. And it's just like, I'm happiest in that place. And the reason it came up, it has become vital for my clients is that I will test minerals and it's very validating. It'll show them subclinical issues. But my issue is I would tell them, I'm like, these particular mineral shifts are not, like, you're not going to see a change in this until you like have a change right here in your heart. And I can tell you that, but it doesn't really, you don't understand it. And now I can take 30 minutes and take you through, tell me about how you feel about this situation and this situation. We can just sit with that for a second. I'm like, do you see how that is different? And it's, oh, now I understand how the change in my heart has to happen. Literally, it's so cool. And I'm thankful for all the frogs I kissed to get to that point where it's like, oh, it was just right here the whole time, actually. What if it's actually very simple and very easy? And it's just a simple framework of observing your thoughts and patterns. And even just from this conversation, Stacy and I don't have something proprietary necessarily, right, around that. So just get curious first about your thoughts. And I would say the main piece that I see here, and you stated so beautifully, is that we often think that our beliefs and our thoughts are facts. And they're not facts. So often they're not facts. Like, just observe your thoughts about something. If your thought about, oh, that person's health must be nice for them, their health is easy. And I'm like, oh, that is not a fact. That is your thoughts about the situation. And that's where it's beautiful to have someone else there to help you like illuminate that. And the reality is this feels really good and also can feel like a touch uncomfortable too when you first start to observe your own thoughts. So I'll just mention that also. So.
Yeah. And I think just one more tidbit on that. Remember that our subconscious is desperately seeking to validate our right now.
Yes.
So if our thoughts are thoughts of the past and thoughts of worry and fear and all of these things, our subconscious is going to find things to reaffirm that every single day. So you have to think bigger than you are now. And that's hard for a lot of people, right? Kids do that. They use their imagination all the time. Kids are so happy, but we can only see right now. And we're just creating more of the same if that's where we're stuck. So if you want your subconscious to work with you on this, you have to start thinking that this is even a possibility. Because if you are staying in that victim role, and with no judgment, I've been there too, but you have to start to assess, like, why am I holding on to this? Am I meeting a basic human need? Am I finding love and connection with my spouse because I'm in this victim state? Or maybe people are calling me and I'm terrified to lose that if I get better because I have this connection with this sickness. It's bringing me some. So you really have to like assess and validate, but you can only do that if you actually start to practice awareness.
Yeah. It's so, honestly, it's just so fun. It's so fun to be able to see that, oh, everything I have is a choice. That's all. Everything I have is a choice. It is alarming. And actually, just to give you a very real example, it's so funny. I think we all need this no matter what. There's no one who doesn't need to observe their thoughts and what their beliefs are. But just my daughter was texting me yesterday about something in her relationship. And I was like, okay, and there's a difference. Would you like me to hold space for this? Would you like me to just listen? Would you like to vent? Or would you like some coaching around it? And she's, I don't think I need coaching. But as she's continuing to talk about it, I was like, yes, you are like, your subconscious is looking to avoid pain. How normal.
Yeah.
How absolutely normal that you're experiencing that your subconscious does not want pain. Unfortunately, that is not how life works.
We're predicting the worst case scenario, and that is a survival mechanism. But when you understand that, I used to even be triggered by my email. Like just by just like the first few words in an email, I'd be like in fight or flight, like looking at that as a threat. And it's just, you have to bring yourself down and remember that is human behavior to avoid pain and conserve energy. And we don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. So we're always going to predict the worst possible thing that could happen, because if we survive that, we're going to make it.
I think another place this shows up for both clients and clinicians is there's almost this like there's a very sexy movement for people after doing one-on-one to leave one-on-one. And really, I think that you have to address your feelings and thoughts around that before you do that, because otherwise it will follow you into the next phase. Like you're going to be triggered by the email or whatever. Maybe it's already there regardless, because I think our main stressors come from our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others. So anything you're triggered by in a relationship with any person is fair game to work on, in my opinion. And I know we're like a slight kindred spirit here, because before we even hit record, you said, I love to be live with my people, right? I love to be able to interact with them. I'm like, oh, I totally get it. I love real connection with people. And anytime someone tries to sell me a version that's not a real connection, I was like, I just see that this is very inefficient, actually. Like, how could you get face to face with this person? We could get to the root of the cause. It's like
literally, or you're just you're contributing more to the overload of information and not application of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not to say, I take a lot of those programs and I've always gotten tidbits, but would they be more? And even your brain is going to get more out of even a webinar or anything like that. If you are actively saying things and writing notes, you're going to get 50% more out of it if it is live. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So many like little nuance. I think like life often, like a lot of it is in the nuance, and there's ways to do everything. So it's not necessarily knocking anything. It's simply, it just reminds me of when you're interacting with humans and people send you a message and like, I have this quick question. I was like, I think we better talk about this. We better have a conversation. We'll get to the real. Tell me what's really happening, because this question is like very dancing around a topic right now, and I do not believe that this is the real question. Let's get underneath the question. And so I feel like that is actually so common, and I think that's one reason I'm so drawn to like having real connections with individuals. So
agree.
Super fun. Okay, let's highlight. We can't change our biochemistry we keep that. You will just be stuck. And when I finally realized, there were so many layers of me realizing that for clients, it can look like you being reliant on a particular clinician, honestly. That's how it felt for me. Was I was like, oh, I'm disempowering this person by allowing them to be here forever. That was like a weird shift that I realized a couple of years ago. And I was like, ooh, yeah, you're in better service if you go work on your nervous system now. That's actually the real thing here right now. That's like the piece of the overwhelm. And if anything else, I feel like we all have all of these same issues. The more I get to coach with clients, the more I'm like, overwhelm comes up all the time. And that's okay. It's no problem. It's a super normal human experience. It's just, let's unpack it. No problem. Let's like look at what that actually means. So anyway, talk all day about that stuff. Blood sugar stuff, it's more than diabetes. It's more than passing your glucose test during pregnancy, which by the way, I did not pass either. So no wonder. Sugar stuff. I always failed the first one. But here's your sign, Krista. And then we talked about insulin resistance. We touched on very briefly circadian biology, which has been a topic here and there all over. Definitely. I love that. I don't know if you feel, I feel like some of these beautiful, simple concepts are really taking kind of our online world a little bit by storm in a wonderful way. And I don't know if I said this on recording, but I said it before we hit recording. I'm resistant to adding anything else to practice that costs my clients more money at this point, right? Because it used to be that our clients came to us because they weren't getting answers at the doctor. But unfortunately now sometimes, and this is like no shade thrown at anyone, I find that I'm going through a lot of stuff where maybe they've actually done some version of functional medicine or whitewashed functional medicine, as I sometimes like to call it, and they still aren't quite there. It's no problem. No problem. I know. And there's so many options. Don't worry. It just takes a little bit more. I always feel like I want to make sure I'm going through that stuff really beautifully for them because I don't want them to get lost between the cracks anymore. Dr. Stacy, what comes to mind if you want people, we talked about lots of topics. It was great. I loved it. What comes to mind if you have a message that you want to share with listeners? Because people always want, what can I do with this? What's an application? 1 or 2 points, whatever. What is the sentiment that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that we always have to be thinking the body is designed to heal itself, right? And so the goal should always, it is always hidden in the day-to-day. What is picking you out of that state, right? What is keeping you, what's in your environment, being internally driven. There's something that's kicking you out of that state, but never think for any reason that your symptoms are your body working against you. It's your body trying to heal. And so how can you support that? Remember that the body always works better with flow over force. So how can you lean into that more so that the body can heal itself?
Yeah, beautiful. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I spend most of my time on Instagram. I don't have time to do any other social at this point. I will be doing YouTube here soon, but yeah, Instagram and my podcast are where I spend most of my time and energy. So yeah.
And you're at Dr. Stacy ND, I think.
At Dr. Stacy ND. Yeah. And then I have group Vibe Wellness, and then I do the group things I just launched late last year. So lots of different ways to catch me.
Perfect. I am so thankful for our time together today.
Thank you
for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
I gotta get myself a little more faith.